In this video, I'll explain everything you need to know about the plasma membrane. Now, the plasma membrane is a boundary between the cell and its environment, and it controls exchange of materials such as nutrients and wastes. Understanding its properties is essential to understanding its cell function. Now, there are two common theories on the molecular structure of the cell membrane, that is the Danieli-Dawson model and the more accepted fluid mosaic model, which I will explain in this video. Now, according to the fluid mosaic model, the plasma membrane consists of a fluid bilayer of phospholipids, but I'll first talk about the phospholipid individually so that you guys can know what it's made up of. A phospholipid is made up of a phosphate, glycerol, and fatty acids obviously from the name contain an acidic group, that's a carboxyl group. Now, if you're doing chemistry, this must not be very difficult for you, but even if you're not, I'll make sure you get the point. So back to the fatty acid, the general formula is that, and the R in that stands for a hydrogen or a group such as a methyl group or an ethyl group. Now, this is a fatty acid in biology, but for those doing chemistry, this is just ethanoic acid. Now, the hydrocarbon tail there, many properties of the lipids are determined by these tails, including their solubility in water. Therefore, these tails are hydrophobic or water-hating. Fatty acids sometimes contain one or more double bonds, and these are said to be unsaturated, and those lacking these double bonds are saturated fatty acids. Now, unsaturated fatty acids melt at a lower point compared to saturated fatty acids. So the more the unsaturated fatty acids, the more fluid the membrane will be. Now, our next component of the phospholipid is glycerol, and this has three hydroxyl groups which each undergo a condensation reaction in three fatty acids to form a lipid. Now, during a condensation reaction, all you should know is that water is lost, and so a phospholipid is basically a lipid containing a phosphate group. So the phosphate group replaces one of the fatty acids and combines with glycerol. So phospholipids have two fatty acid tails and a phosphate head. Now the phosphate head is polar and therefore is soluble in water, which is in this case is it's hydrophilic or water loving. So phospholipids have hydrophilic heads and hydrophobic tails. Now, with that out of the way, we can now move to our fluid mosaic model of the plasma membrane. According to the fluid mosaic model of the plasma membrane consists of a fluid bilayer of phospholipids. Now, bi basically means two, and in this case, it is a layer which is two phospholipid molecules stick. The phospholipid bilayer has phospholipids with hydrophilic heads facing the watery environment both inside and outside the cell, and hydrophobic heads grouped together in the interior of the cell membrane. Now, proteins are embedded in this phospholipid layer, and some proteins are found on the inner and outer surface of the phospholipid bilayer, and these are called extrinsic proteins or surface proteins. Some proteins are partially embedded in the phospholipid bilayer, and these are called intrinsic proteins. Some intrinsic proteins span the phospholipid bilayer, and these are called integral proteins such as carrier proteins and channel proteins. Now, glycoproteins are proteins with carbohydrates attached to them. Same with glycolipids. These are lipids with carbohydrates attached to them. Also embedded in the phospholipid bilayer is cholesterol. Now, we shall get to know its function later. Now, this fluid mosaic model is said to be fluid because the individual phospholipids and proteins are constantly moving, giving the membrane a flexible structure, and they are said to be mosaic. Mosaic basically means something made of many pieces that fit together to form one pattern. So the plasma membrane is said to be mosaic because its proteins vary in size and shape and are scattered randomly in the phospholipid. Now here we shall get to know the different functions of these components of the plasma membrane. I shall start with cholesterol. This prevents the close packing of phospholipids and maintains the fluidity of the phospholipid bilayer. Now, during high temperatures, the fatty acids, more so the unsaturated fatty acids in the phospholipid melt, and the phospholipids become loosely attached, making the phosphobilayer more fluid. And the cholesterol here keeps those individual phospholipids together. Now, when temperatures decrease, the phospholipids become more close, and the cholesterol here keeps them apart, so it increases the flexibility and stability of the membrane. It also prevents escape and entry of polar molecules through the membrane. Next are the proteins, and these have many functions, some of which include they act as enzymes. Proteins also act as receptor sites for hormones. Now, as hormones move in blood, they can only recognize the target cell by binding with the correct receptor site on its cell membrane, and therefore these proteins, some of them act as receptor sites for hormones. Now, some proteins, more so the glycoproteins, act as antigens. These enable the immune system to recognize the body's cells. Now, if a foreign antigen is detected, it is therefore attacked by the immune system. Now, then we have channel proteins and carrier proteins that are involved in selective transport of polar molecules and ions across the membrane through facilitated diffusion and active transport. Now, transport across the cell membrane is essential for many reasons, such as to obtain nutrients, excrete waste products, and secrete useful substances such as hormones and enzymes. Now, then we have the glycolipids are used in cell recognition. That's all I can tell you about them. I hope this was an eye-opener for you on the plasma membrane, and I believe it will make your personal research on the plasma membrane much easier. So please like the video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that bell icon and get notifications every time I release new videos. Thank you for watching.